If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 10 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis due to a bird strike into Busch Stadium. In the area code 314, it will be a burning bush, as described in Exodus 3:14, on November 27, 2024. She will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and then Barack Obama will replace Michelle. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on November 8th, 2024. I am predicting that former President Jimmy Carter will die on November 17th. It is predicted that President Trump will die from a heart attack on December 12th, 2024. It is also predicted that Trump's heart attack will be triggered by a directed energy weapon that will target Trump through Bluetooth technology. The components inside the pointy thing that Trump took will facilitate this, and it is believed that when Barack Obama is sitting next to Trump at Jimmy Carter's funeral, Obama will obtain Trump's Bluetooth MAC address, which will be used to target Trump with a directed energy weapon. I am predicting that dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan, New York City, and there will be a large-scale evacuation on December 16th. I am predicting that Israel will bomb Iran on December 17th. Israel will nuke and completely destroy Damascus, Syria on December 26th, 2024. It is predicted that after Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash, Joe Biden will appoint Michelle Obama as his vice president. On December 17th, the Democrat Party will use their electoral votes to make Michelle Obama the president-elect. It is predicted that on either December 22nd or 25th, Joe Biden will suffer a stroke. It is predicted that on December 26th, 2024, Joe Biden will step down and Vice President Michelle Obama will become the 47th president. It is predicted that on December 26th, Michelle Obama will appoint Barack Obama as the 51st vice president. On January 12th, 2025, Michelle Obama will step down and Barack Obama will become the 48th president. His public inauguration ceremony will be on January 20th, 2025. It is predicted that on April 20th, 2025, there will be an outbreak of monkeypox or Marburg disease or both. April 20th will be a symbolic beginning to a new pandemic. June 8th, 2025, the true Feast of Pentecost in the calendar that watches for new moons, will be the day of the resurrection rapture event. It is predicted that on June 9th, the day after the rapture, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to the fifth trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens, and it is possible that June 9th will be the day Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. At some point, there will be a massive Mary apparition that will deceive the masses, because all Mary apparitions in history have been demons pretending to be Mary. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed, that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist, and 5G frequencies. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. It is predicted that on August 6th, 2025, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River for over 100 years will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. The reason for this is that Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, symbolic of Noah's Ark. Niagara in the native language means straight, narrow way, and Niagara's Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the CN Tower in downtown Toronto, because Toronto and its tower are symbolic of the Tower of Babel. In a game of horseshoes, the object is to aim the horseshoe and throw it at the metal stick, which is why the Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the metal stick that is the CN Tower. God is communicating that as testament for those who will live in the 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, the geography of North America will, as a result of a massive earthquake, be divided by a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. This destruction will be judgment on America and Canada for attempting to divide God's land, Israel. When this happens, the water in the Great Lakes will spill out over southern Ontario and Toronto. I am predicting that a solar flare will erupt on the surface of the sun and send a coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth on August 13th, 2025, which will knock out America's power grid and will lead to food shortages. The hit of the coronal mass ejection, predicted for August 13th, that will knock out the power grid will also knock many planes out of the sky. I am predicting that on August 23rd, 2025, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth, which will trigger the eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. The asteroid will also trigger a mega landslide on Hawaii Island that will trigger a mega tsunami that will hit the West Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be on the Day of Atonement, October 1st, 2025. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Make a note right now of these alternative platforms that you can find me on, in case you can't find me later. All right, it is now after October 30th, and like I will explain, we expected signs on this date to reveal adding 5 days. In this Game 5, it was in fact the last game of the World Series as it was thought it might be. And anyway, that confirmed the 5 days, and that got us to this date, November 4th. And the signs on this date confirmed all of the analysis, which will be explained in the Jimmy Carter videos. This was the day of the death of the King of Music, Quincy Jones. And that revealed adding 13 days to get the date. It is predicted that Jimmy Carter will die on November 17th. It is amazing, but it will be explained in the Jimmy Carter videos. If you have already watched this introductory information regarding this explanation for October 30th and Paul Simon, you can skip ahead to the 43-minute mark. All right, welcome. This brief introduction here, the purpose of this diagram here is to explain how October 30th, 2024 will be a step. This is being recorded on October 25th. October 30th will be a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date of Paul Simon's death. The singer-songwriter Paul Simon is predicted to die on November 8th. And October 30th is an important, extremely important step along the way. I will explain what I mean. The playoffs, or rather the World Series between the New York Yankees and Los Angeles Dodgers will begin tonight. It was predicted before the playoffs that these two teams would be in the World Series. The purpose of this prediction, or rather video, is to explain how October 30th was known ahead of time to be pointed to by God as being related to the trail of signs leading to the predicted death of singer-songwriter Paul Simon. There are a number of videos that are on this channel that are predicting this date, October 30th, explaining all of the evidence that God used to point ahead of time to October 30th, which is overwhelming, regarding the death of Paul Simon. It was learned last night that it is, or will be, a step in the trail of signs. All of the analysis is 100% correct. I guarantee it. There will be a prophetic sign on October 30th that will be relevant to Paul Simon. And I am more than confident that it will be a baseball sign. That is because, and it will be a New York Yankees sign, and that is because Paul Simon is known to be an avid New York Yankees baseball fan. But more than that, God has used Paul Simon in New York Yankees baseball signs. For example, this date right here, the opening day of the 1999 season, when Paul Simon sang before the game began in center field of Yankee Stadium, Mrs. Robinson. That is because one of the lyrics in Mrs. Robinson is about Joe DiMaggio, who had just died prior to the opening of the season. Okay, and Paul Simon is now predicted to die on November 8th, which will be exactly 1,335 weeks after this date. This is extremely prophetic. This is it's a period of time that is 1,335 days, that is at the end of the last chapter of the book of Daniel, that regards the end and the return of Lord Jesus Christ, the end of the age. Okay? And that's what we're talking about. The timing of Paul Simon's death is a major prophetic sign, or will be, because he is symbolism for the brief period of silence that John heard in heaven that preceded the judgments of destruction. Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. In Revelation chapter 8:1, the sound of silence was heard before the judgment destruction, and that's why Paul Simon will die on the date E11:8, which hints at Revelation 8:1. Furthermore, this date outside of the U.S. is written as 8:11. And also, God used the dates 8:10 and 8:11, August 10th and 11th this year, for precisely the same reason, as a step in the trail of science to this date, the date it's predicted that Paul Simon will die. Okay, now I want to make this video as brief as possible because I just want to make this video an explanation for how October 30th is a step in the trail to November 8th. Again, I'm going to place this introduction at the beginning of videos that will be talking about October 30th. Okay, and the analysis is 100% correct. And what you need to know is this is how it works. The skeptic will say, oh, you just, pick a bunch of dates and you're finally going to get right sooner or later. That's ridiculous, first of all. Paul Simon is only 83. It could be another 10 years before he dies. And second of all, it's not every date, as you can see, And furthermore, that when the prediction comes to pass, it will prove what I'm saying. And the reasons for how I know ahead of time will prove it. But also, I'm also predicting that Jimmy Carter will die 4 days before the death of Paul Simon. And to get the deaths of these two men right, that's beyond anything comprehensible, really. Okay? And Jimmy Carter will die in the fourth state, which is why the 4 days. One reason. We want to keep this brief, okay? It's also 2 + 2 days. He has 22 grandchildren. He is symbolism for Methuselah in the Bible, who was the grandfather of Noah. Methuselah died at the timing of the flood beginning, the beginning of the judgment, and the name Methuselah means when he dies, destruction. Both of these men are symbolic of the timing of the beginning of judgment, destruction of America. Following the sound of silence in Revelation 8:1 and the rest of the chapter of chapter 8 begins the 7 trumpet judgments, which is why Paul Simon's last album released was 7 Psalms, and it's exactly 77 weeks before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. The release of 7 Psalms is released 77 weeks exactly to the date Paul Simon is predicted to die, and his death will symbolize the sound of silence that will be followed by the 7 trumpet judgments, hence the name 7 Psalms. And by the way, he was instructed in a dream to make 7 Psalms. He was told the name of it and everything, as he explains. This date of Paul Simon's death will be exactly 7 months after this 7 weeks connection to the date of the rapture on Pentecost in the true calendar that watches for new moons. This will be symbolic of Bridge Over Troubled Water, the rapture. His big song, Bridge Over Troubled Water, is symbolic of the rapture. In the Bible, the Israelites took the promised land, which is symbolic of taking heaven, the promised land, after a symbolic 3 sets of 7, and furthermore, the 3 sets of 7 was really a 7 and a 7 and a 7. I mean, a 7 and a 7 times 7, or a 7 and a 7, 7, which is exactly what's displayed here, illustrated. through God's signs. Okay. The album Seven Psalms was released when Paul Simon was 81 years old, which is further confirmation that this Seven Psalms album hints at the seven trumpet judgments following Revelation 8:1 that describes the brief period of silence that was observed in heaven, which is again why the song that launched Paul Simon's career is Sound of Silence. And so here we have the timing of Paul Simon's death and Jimmy Carter's death communicating from God the timing of the beginning of the judgment destruction of specifically America, because God is primarily focused on America. By the way, that's why two of Paul Simon's big hits were the songs America and American Tune, the latter of which Paul Simon sang at Jimmy Carter's pre-inaugural ball. And again, in God's Signs, which is explained more in the Carter videos, Jimmy Carter is symbolism for Methuselah. Methuselah in the Bible died at the timing of the flood judgment, and the name Methuselah means when he dies, destruction. Jimmy Carter will die on this 11-4 date, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, and therefore hints at the 44th president. Furthermore, it will be the 4 times 4th anniversary of the election of the 44th president. And it will also be the prophetic anniversary of the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which was the last 444 days of Jimmy Carter's presidency. Jimmy Carter will also die in the 4th state, and this is why 4 days from the death of Methuselah, Jimmy Carter, which means when he dies, destruction, will be the death of Paul Simon, who will point to the sound of silence that directly precedes the 7 trumpet judgments. This is what this is. This period of sound of silence, this symbolism, is this 11 plus 8 days. From the date that Paul Simon is predicted to die, 11/8, it is 11 plus 8 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium as she is homeward bound to her mansion in Los Angeles the day before Thanksgiving. And through her death will be the rise of the Antichrist through her replacement. The 44th president will ultimately become the president again because of her death. Okay, and so this is astounding because this 11 plus 8 days hints at Revelation 8:1. From the death of the singer who sang Sound of Silence, which points to Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence in heaven, it is 11 plus 8 days to the beginning of the destruction. This is exactly what God will be communicating with the death of Paul Simon. This brief period of sound of silence before the judgment destruction begins, which will begin with the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. Seven Psalms was released 530 days, 53. The reciprocal of it is 0.0188, which is the number God frequently uses, 188, to hint at H188, the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Bible Concordance, which is the word that means woe, exclamation mark, used in the context of extreme judgment from God. This connects to this date here, which is the predicted date of the prophetic expected, predicted in advance sign involving the New York Yankees player Aaron Judge, as in 188 used in the context of judgment. His number is 99, and in the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. That's why prophetically his name is Judge. All right. This will all be pointing to, as explained in the must-watch video I titled, Harris Will Crash into Ballpark. Her plane will crash into a baseball stadium on November 27th. Simon will die on November 8th equals Obama's first pitch. Okay, in Bible prophecy, or rather in God's signs, pitchers on the pitching mound are symbolic of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Obama wore jersey number 5 in this prophetic first pitch that he threw, which I explain in this video. All right? Paul Simon is associated with the number 5 in God's signs. There's so many examples. His name, Paul Simon, is equal to 500 in Hebrew gematria, and the Antichrist's word in Greek is the 500th word in the concordance, mentioned 5 times. Paul Simon released this 7 Psalms album exactly 500 months after the prophetic reunion concert in Central Park that attracted 500,000 people. With Art Garfunkel, he made 5 albums, the 5th of which won 5 Grammys. Paul Simon is mansion symbolism. He sings about the mansion in Graceland, which sits on 14 acres, which is the 5th semi-prime number. And ultimately, this points to the White House mansion that is on 5 acres. Paul Simon sang Graceland in the White House mansion on the date 410, which is at 14, the 5th semi-prime number. And on, as I explained in other videos. And that's why this date that is related to Paul Simon is a game 5. And it is 5 days before the predicted death of Jimmy Carter. Paul Simon sang at Jimmy Carter's inauguration ball. Okay? This date is exactly 5 weeks after this Paul Simon sign, which was expected in advance, explained in other videos, the indictment of the mayor of New York. And that was the day after Paul Simon gave a private concert in New York City, a rare thing for him to do at the age of 82. Okay, and on. Okay. Ultimately, this is leading to 5th trumpet day, the day after the rapture, June 9th, which will be when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm, and there will be a symbolic beginning to a mass demonic possession, which will be facilitated by 5G frequencies. Music is frequencies. A phrase in the Bible says that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. Frequencies are air. Frequencies are in the air. They travel through the air. Music, 5G frequencies, will trigger the components that are inside people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, the pointy thing, which will then trigger delta brain waves and mass demonic possession, which is symbolized, or rather the movie The Shining is about demonic possession, and the first lyric of Paul Simon's song Graceland is the Mississippi Delta, as in delta brain waves, was shining like a national guitar, and Paul Simon dated Shelley Duvall and is widely known to have broken up with her at the airport, as in portals through which demons will cross over into the earthly realm, before she left for the UK to film the movie The Shining, and on, as I explained in other videos. So that's the relevance of the number 5, okay? Paul Simon is predicted to die on the day of the prophetic funeral of Jimmy Carter, and as I explained in other videos, Barack Obama will be sitting next to Trump in the pew, lined up, and Barack Obama will obtain Trump's Bluetooth MAC address that people have because Trump took the thing, and people who have taken the thing, the components inside the thing that are in the people, engender a Bluetooth MAC address. This will be used to Trump's Bluetooth MAC address will be used to target Trump with a directed energy weapon. And it's 54 days because of this 5 and 4 days connection, but also the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which God has used and demonstrated in his signs to be symbolic of oppressive minority laws. And the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment, as in the first black president, were not paid the equivalent amount the white northern soldiers were paid And this was official policy from Washington, D.C., and it was $13 because 13 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist because it is described in the 13th chapter of the Bible, but also the number 13 in the Bible is symbolic of the Antichrist. And anyway, the Antichrist will use digital programmable currencies, which is why the amount of pay was the story of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first Civil War black regiment, and the pay that they weren't received, and that's why digital programmable currency by the Antichrist and the Antichrist system will be used to program the currency to restrict the buying and selling of food that will be rationed to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. I'm trying to do this quickly, okay? This was a prophetic baseball sign. Otani, this unprecedented player who's from Japan, God is using Japan for Japanese animation symbolism because the genre of film is obsessed with spiritual possession, and we are talking about mass demonic possession, the culture with their silly, nonsensical characters are symbolic of demons. It's rooted in their pagan spiritualist religion. And anyway, this was the day that Otani, this unprecedented player from Japan, playing for the Los Angeles Angels, as in fallen angels, Los Angeles in God's sign, since it fallen angels, he was the first player to ever hit 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the season. And this is exactly 50 days to November 8th. Okay, but it is also connected. The trail of signs connects this date to October 30th. And the point that I'm going at here is that because, okay, so he also hit 51 home runs and 51 stolen bases in this day, and 5 + 1 days gets us to this date, which is then exactly 5 weeks to this date, this Game 5 sign that we are expecting. Okay? And so, in other words, this sign connects to October 30th, and what I am doing is, as in this video, explaining that October 30th is a step. And you need to watch the rest of this video because this is how it works. If God were to, okay, here is the thing. If God were to just tap a person on the shoulder and say, tell the world that such and such is going to happen on such and such date, it would provide nothing for us. It is through the interconnected signs of it is through these connections, through the prophetic signs. And by the way, none of the prophetic signs can be properly, fully understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs, which is only being explained on this channel. And it is through these connected trails of signs that God is able to tell stories and reveal extremely important knowledge and information that everyone needs to know. That's why when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that every minute of every video on this channel must be watched. That is the point. Now, I'm just going to finish this up here, explaining how October 30th was a step, the date that this video is being posted proves that I am producing this video ahead of time. I just slipped there because I take these things so for granted in my mind that I use the past tense, okay? Now, this date, let's see, what else should we get at here? Now, I'm predicting that on this date, something will happen regarding Aaron Judge, and it will point to the World Series in 1977, which is explained in the Obama first pitch video that I just mentioned. Now, the thing too, though, is that this date is exactly 99 weeks after this Aaron Judge sign, which, by the way, was expected in advance. Well, rather, I expected a sign related to the coming prediction of the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan on this date. And then the player for New York City, number 99, Aaron Judge, signed his prophetic 9-year contract for $360 million. Now, this was known ahead of time. One reason being is that it was exactly 9 times 9 years after the bombings in Pearl Harbor. Okay? So that's why 9 times 9 years later, we get number 99, 9-year contract. Also 81, which is 9 times 9, is a 9/11 number because 9 divided by 11 is 0.8181 into infinity, and the flight that hit the first tower had 81 passengers. 360 million hints at 3 6s, and 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And also 36 is 6 times 6, and 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36 is a triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number of the 36 row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way to 36 equals 666. And this is then followed with 36 days, but this connection is 60 plus 0.00 plus 60.00 plus 60.00% of a year. Okay. And so that gets us to this date in which it is predicted that Aaron Judge, number 99, will give us a prophetic sign, which will be very prophetic, but the more to this is explained in the first pitch video, okay, that explains much more regarding what's going on here. This is just an introduction video. Now, this date, by the way, is also exactly 19,000 days after the day that Jackie Robinson died, and this is a World Series that will be pointing to this rivalry between the New York Yankees and Los Angeles Dodgers, which included Jackie Robinson. But this is relevant because of Paul Simon's song, Mrs. Robinson. As I mentioned here, he sang in the baseball stadium in Yankee Stadium, but also Michelle Robinson, which is the prophetic reason for the song Mrs. Robinson by Paul Simon, who God is using for prophetic signs, because Michelle Robinson will appoint Barack Obama as her vice president, and then she will step down. This will all be after Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium. Okay, so, and he wore 42, the number that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Okay, and let's see, anything else here? We got 45 days to the day of Paul Simon's concert in New York City. This 1,305 number is about the number 45 because it follows the 1,290 number, a difference of 45 days in that prophecy. And also 45 is symbolic of the end, as is this number. 45, the reciprocal of it is 0.02222 into infinity, and which hints at the second coming. But also 0.022 hints at the mark of the Antichrist, because the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22 in the book of Ezekiel chapter 9, and the 45 is the ninth triangular number. In Ezekiel chapter 9, the mark of the Antichrist would have been a Tav letter, the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. One last thing here, too, is that this date here, the day that Paul Simon sang in New York City, was exactly 32,200 days after Joe DiMaggio crashed into player number 4, Goose Goslin. This gives us a number 4 and 5 because Joe DiMaggio wore number 5. And that is ultimately hinting at this connection here, which gets us this 5 weeks connection to this date, and then 5 days to this date, and then so this is 45 right here, there's a 45 right here, this ends at 45, but also Joe DiMaggio gives us a 5, okay, and this is game 5, and then 5 days, okay, and it's also 5 days after this prophetic baseball sign right here. Okay, now the reason why this is prophetic is because they collided in center field. Paul Simon sang in center field, okay, and this caused Joe DiMaggio to be knocked unconscious, and that's why this is famous. Okay, but it was with Goose Goslin, another Hall of Famer, and Goose hints at a bird, and Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium in center field after a bird strike. The reason why 32,200 days is because Joe DiMaggio is associated with Marilyn Monroe, and Marilyn Monroe is known for having died at a young age. And she is known for her 2 movies in which the theme is immortality. The first lie told at the beginning of the age is that Eve told by the serpent in the garden that she surely shall not die, which is symbolized by Genesis 3:22, hence the 32,200 days exact connection. Okay, because all of this is leading to the coming lie at the end of the age, which will be the same lie as the lie at the beginning of the age in Genesis 3:22, which is that the promise of immortality without God, promised by the coming demons pretending to be aliens. Okay, and so we'll just leave it at that, I believe. Now, Paul Simon is predicted to die on 11/8, which is 11 plus 8 days before the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a baseball stadium, which will be symbolized by homeward bound. She will be homeward bound to her $5 million mansion next to the I-5, and Paul Simon, who is associated with the number 5, had a big hit, Homeward Bound, okay? And that's amazing. But it is also 19 days, and ultimately this points to the 1919 Black Sox, hence the first pitch that Obama threw for the Chicago White Sox when in the year in 2005, when they won the World Series for the first time since 1919. But also this 19,000 days in turn connects with 9 days and then 19 days to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, and then she will be replaced by Mrs. Michelle Robinson, hence Mrs. Robinson, and about Joe DiMaggio, who was number 5 and who crashed in center field with Goose Goslin. Okay, so I think you get the idea here. October 30th is a step in the trail of signs. Now, make sure that you watch the rest of this video. As I said, this is just an introduction, and as I explained, the reason for all of this and the reason why October 30th will be a step in the trail of signs is so that you can learn all of the stories and therefore thereby the information and extremely important knowledge that God wants everyone to know. This is the purpose of all of this elaborate matrix of signs. It is for him to tell these stories that are only being told on this channel. Make sure you watch the rest of this video. All right, to emphasize once more, this video was produced prior to October 30th. Even what I am saying is prior to October 30th. And it is known now that October 30th will not be the day that Paul Simon will die, but instead will be an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date of Paul Simon's death. So do not be confused when you are watching the rest of this video when there is mention of connections to October 30th, implying that Paul Simon will die on October 30th. You now know how it works, okay? And so don't be confused in the rest of this video when we talk about October 30th in regards to the death of Paul Simon. It is a step, and all of the analysis for October 30th is 100% correct. That will be proven when the prediction comes to pass on November 8th. Okay, a couple other things that I forgot here. This Paul Simon related sign, the indictment of the mayor of New York, which ended up with the raid of the Gracie Mansion, which is a Graceland Mansion, and Paul Simon and all that. This is 44 days. We're ultimately talking about the rise of the 44th president through the plane crash. And 44 days is also 2 times 22 days. And through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington, who was born on the date 2/22, which is why, for example, the World Health Organization officially declared the CVD disease begins with a pan, ends with a demic, exactly 222 months after 9/11 on March 11th, 2020. And another thing I forgot, if there is a Game 7, it will be 6 days, which is 2 times 3 days, and Barack Obama, the basketball president, wore jersey number 23 in high school. It'll be that Paul Simon will die 6 days later, if there is a Game 7. And that, in turn, will be exactly 6 weeks. After this prophetic Dodgers sign in Dodger Stadium, and this, if there is a Game 7, will be in Dodger Stadium. And this was the day that Trump dodged another debate because that was after the other debate, which was rigged. And there was a prophetic fire right beside Dodger Stadium that was seen from the seats in the stadium during the game, and on, as I explained in another video. But it was at an old courthouse, which is symbolic of the coming shoplifted referendum and all of that, right? But also this 6 weeks is 42 days, and player number 42, Jackie Robinson, played his career with the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's also why this will be relevant. If there is a Game 7, there could be something more that will point back to Jackie Robinson, and if so, it will be a hint at Michelle Robinson, who will appoint Barack Obama as her vice president and then step down and make Barack Obama the president. By the way, what I really meant to say regarding the significance of the fire of the old courthouse next to the Dodger Stadium, it's communicating the upcoming constitutional crisis. All right, before we begin this video, that we'll talk about how it is known ahead of time that Paul Simon, the famous singer-songwriter, will die on November 8th. It needs to be explained how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It's an interconnected web, and none of God's prophetic signs, which, by the way, Jesus commanded his disciples to watch for, can be fully or properly understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs. It is through this that God is able to tell stories. And this connecting of signs engenders trails of signs that, in fact, have steps in the trail. All right? For example, and by the way, the reason why God does this is because it is through this that he can tell stories, and really profound stories that reveal extremely important knowledge and information that everyone needs to know. It's quite different than if you were to tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, tell the world that this is going to happen on such and such date. That would essentially give us nothing compared to what God is doing in his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And one such date that was a step, that was known in advance to be expected for being relevant to the coming death of Paul Simon, was March 6th. There are about 10 other videos that tell the stories, the amazing beyond words and extremely important stories that God told regarding Paul Simon that led to March 6th, 2024. Okay? And there are now 3 videos or so. There's the videos, the few videos that come after March 6th explain how the trail of signs leads on from March 6th to November 8th, the date it is now predicted that Paul Simon will die. Okay, but if you only listen to those videos, the ones that will be recently posted, you will have missed everything, or most things, about Paul Simon. You won't know these stories that God has been telling through his big picture of signs about Paul Simon. I can't stress enough what a shame that would be, but it's not only a shame, there's essential knowledge that you need to know. And so what I am saying is that go back into the video catalog after the prediction comes to pass and watch the other videos that show and demonstrate and explain how God was leading to March 6th, 2024. In other words, the thumbnail will say that Paul Simon is predicted to die on March 6th, and those videos are 100% correct. The signs we received on March 6th confirmed all of the analysis. Like I'm saying, it's a step in the trail of signs. And the signs that occurred on March 6th are amazing, and they are completely relevant to Paul Simon, as you will see. The wise person will recognize that when the prediction comes to pass, they will know that they need to watch every single minute of every video on this channel, and including specifically all of the Paul Simon videos. Okay? The big picture comes together as more pieces of the puzzle come, and it becomes clearer, but the stories that God is telling are told in the videos that predict Paul Simon will die on March 6th. So make sure you watch those other videos too. There's like 8 or 10 other videos. If you have already watched this introductory information in the other video, you can skip ahead to exactly the 2-hour and 40-minute mark. All right. In this video, I'm documenting this amazing story that God has told through his big picture of prophetic end times signs, which is only being explained on this channel. This prediction that Paul Simon, the singer and songwriter, will die on September 25th, 2024. This is an amazing story. It is involving so many different things, and what can I tell you? God is extremely brilliant. And this story that God is telling contains extremely important information that everyone needs to know, as is always the case. All right, this video was produced prior to September 25th. It was known ahead of time that God was pointing to this date, September 25th. This video will explain the truly profound, amazing, and absolutely must learn information regarding how he pointed to September 25th, and that is the point. It would be one thing for God to tap someone on the shoulder and say, tell the world that such and such is going to happen on such and such date. But that would be essentially useless beyond, I suppose, proving that the God of the Bible is the true God. And that would only be proven really by taking the word from that person, that's how he knew. Anyway, what God has instead done is developed elaborate trails of signs, prophetic signs that connect to each other. In fact, the full intended meaning of all of the prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs. And so it is through these trails of signs that end up producing these steps, these dates that other signs connect to as a sort of hub, if you will, reveal and tell stories. And it is through these stories that God is telling that he's revealing important and essential knowledge and information. And that will be the case with this video. So, briefly, what happened on September 25th? Well, first of all, the day before was the day that Paul Simon had a private concert in New York City. And it wasn't learned ahead of time that he would be doing such a thing. And that date, September 24th, was also known to be pointed to. The reason why the video was made for the 25th is because it was figured logically that, well, if God is pointing to both of these dates, the second one would be the date on which he would die. Anyway, it was known that he was pointing to the 24th as well, and like I just alluded to, it was a little bit confusing as to why these two dates back to back, but it's now clear. And by the way, also, September 19th was also known ahead of time, and on that day, we received the relevant sign that confirmed all of the analysis, and it was a baseball sign. And that gave us a really strong heads up to how it is that Paul Simon is an avid baseball fan, specifically a New York Yankees fan. And the other videos explain exactly the baseball sign that happened, but Ohtani, this star, the biggest star in Major League Baseball today from Japan, who God is using to, for one, hint at Obama, the name Ohtani hints at Obama. Ohtani became the first player in history to hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in a season. And in this same game, which is said to have been the most or greatest offensive game in history, and there's more details to it, but he also, in the same game, became the first player to hit 51 home runs and steal 51 stolen bases in the same season. That hinted at adding 5 and also 5 plus 1 days to get to September 24th and September 25th. That's amazing. Now, September 24th was exactly 32,200 days after Joe DiMaggio collided infamously with another Hall of Fame baseball player, Goose Goslin. It knocked Joe DiMaggio unconscious, and this collision with Goose Goslin is a hint at the coming crash of Kamala Harris due to a bird strike. On September 25th, the New York Yankees in New York City played the Orioles, a type of bird, and the final score was 7-9 because Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash 7 times 9 days later. And her plane crash will be into a baseball stadium. All right. Now, the 32,200 days, though, gets us to September 24th, the day that Paul Simon had a private concert in New York City. And that is because Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in Yankee Stadium shortly after Joe DiMaggio died, because the song Mrs. Robinson contains a lyric about Joe DiMaggio. And Joe DiMaggio is associated with Marilyn Monroe. The story of Joe DiMaggio, everyone knows his love for Marilyn Monroe, which is why he organized her funeral and then bent over the casket publicly telling Marilyn Monroe that he loved her 3 times. Okay, so he's associated with Marilyn Monroe, and Marilyn Monroe is known for having died at such an early age. That's the thing to know about Marilyn Monroe, is how she died at the age of 36. She was, by the way, born exactly 4 plus 4 plus 4 months after the birth of the 44th president, because the 44th president's the Antichrist, and Marilyn Monroe is being used by God in his signs because of the 2 movies she starred in that contained a theme of immortality. And the big lie at the end of the age will be the same lie at the beginning of the age when the serpent in the garden told Eve that she surely will not die. And this lie is mentioned, this lie of achieving immortality without God is mentioned in Genesis 3:22, which is why the 32,200 exact days from the collision to Paul Simon and his concert in New York City. All right, now other videos explain how Paul Simon is associated with the number 5, but on September 25th, the mayor of New York City was indicted, and it was for a corruption scandal regarding the embassy of the country of Turkey, which is why Kamala Harris is predicted to die the day before Turkey Day, Thanksgiving. Paul Simon is predicted to die the day before Halloween because the indictment of Eric Adams included a raid of his Gracie mansion, and the name Eric Adams hints at the fictional The Addams Family that is about their lives in the Addams Family mansion. Also on this September 25th day, or in conjunction with the indictment anyway, we had the tour of a haunted mansion in New York City by Jimmy Kimmel and Prince Harry, and that was aired on the Jimmy Kimmel show. It was actually on September 26th, the day of the raid of the Gracie mansion. But this is all getting, it's enough to know that it's in conjunction with the September 25th and Eric Adams, who was indicted on the 25th, and then his mansion was raided on the 26th. But anyway, on the 26th as well, the granddaughter of Elvis, an interview of her was, People.com published an exclusive interview with the granddaughter of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, and Prince Harry toured the king's mansion. That was a prophetic sign in 2014. And the interview is about the granddaughter, who is now the current owner of Graceland Mansion, her completion of her mother's memoir, which is about her mother's life and Graceland Mansion. Well, Paul Simon, his most famous, biggest solo album is Graceland, and the song Graceland is about his travel to the Graceland Mansion. Paul Simon this year sang Graceland in the White House mansion, which is what all of this mansion is ultimately pointing to, this mansion symbolism, and also the temple on the Temple Mount. But the White House mansion will soon be occupied by the Antichrist, the 44th president. And anyway, the White House mansion is situated on 5 acres. Graceland Mansion is on 14 acres, and 14 is the 5th semi-prime number. Anyway, September 25th was this step in the trail that revealed adding exactly 5 weeks to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die on October 30th, the day before Halloween. On a Wednesday, because of Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel's first album named Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. I, in fact, think that Paul Simon will die at 3 a.m. But there's so many reasons for how Paul Simon is associated with the number 5, and I've explained it too many other times in the other videos, so I'll just leave it at that. But that's why 5 weeks from this step on September 25th. Actually, there is another very important reason for this 5 weeks in context of this particular video, and that is that Joe DiMaggio wore jersey number 5. So we have this connection from the famous or infamous collision of Joe DiMaggio with Goose Goslin that knocked him unconscious in Yankee Stadium. We have in center field, and we have Paul Simon singing about Joe DiMaggio in center field, and this connection of 32,200 days, and then 5 weeks exactly later, and that's because, again, Joe DiMaggio wore jersey number 5. But there are many other reasons for Paul Simon and the connection with the number 5 in God's signs. All right, but also, Paul Simon sang about Joe DiMaggio in his song Mrs. Robinson, and what God has done here is incorporated the most famous Baltimore Oriole in history, Brooks Robinson, who wore jersey number 5. Okay, and again, this is all because God is pointing to Michelle Robinson, who will, after replacing Joe Biden, make Barack Obama her vice president and make him the president again. Now, Brooks Robinson, speaking of him, he died exactly 2 times. He famously played his entire career with the Baltimore Orioles. And I mentioned a minute ago how the New York Yankees played the Baltimore Orioles on September 25th and also on the 26th. And the 25th game hinted at, through the score 7-9, adding 7 times 9 days to get the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, after which she will be replaced by Michelle Robinson. Well, Brooks Robinson played his entire 23-year career with the Baltimore Orioles, and also, by the way, the Antichrist's number is 23 because Barack Obama, the basketball president, wore jersey number 23 in high school. Well, the 23-year career of Brooks Robinson, well, I should say Brooks Robinson died, and he played 23 years for the Orioles. He died on September 26th, 2023, exactly 2 times 3 months, which hints at 23, before the Baltimore Bridge collapsed. And again, he played for the Baltimore Orioles, and the bridge is known for having killed the bridge collapse is known for having killed 2 times 3 people. And that date, March 26th, 2024, was exactly 2 times 3 months before September 26th, the day of the mansion signs. And that day is 5 weeks inclusive count to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. So, in other words, both of these player number 5s connect with Paul Simon. But not only that, though, there is another connection, because Joe DiMaggio is part of the story of Joe DiMaggio is how he played for the New York Yankees against the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1947 World Series. And that was the first World Series in which the league had integrated with black players, famously with Jackie Robinson. And Jackie Robinson is a part of God's signs here too. He wore jersey number 42, and now the number 42 is retired. No one can wear 42 on any baseball team. It's a number that's been retired for the entire league. Number 42, because the Antichrist is associated with the number 42 in Bible prophecy. There's much more to say regarding this connection between Joe DiMaggio and Jackie Robinson, which will be explained in another video, but that is more confirmation for the relevance of the connection between Joe DiMaggio, number 5, and Brooks Robinson, number 5, both connecting to this September 25th date, which is exactly 5 weeks before the predicted death of Paul Simon. Make sure that you watch the rest of this video, again explaining the must-learn information that is part of so many other things that God has been showing and revealing and including in his big picture of signs that will only be explained in this video. So it's very, very important. Like I said, if God just wanted to tap someone on the shoulder and say, you know, Paul Simon's going to die at October 30th, that would be one thing. But the whole point here is to learn how it is that God pointed to September 25th ahead of time. And when the prediction happens that Paul Simon dies on October 30th, it will prove all of this information for how God pointed to September 25th ahead of time, because October 30th is known ahead of time because of September 25th. So you therefore would want to know how God pointed to September 25th ahead of time. This email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on September 25th, 2024. As we can see, this email was composed on September 19th, okay, ahead of time. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I'll forward this to you. The reason why this was composed on September 19th is because of the prophetic signs we received on September 19th. That revealed the date that Paul Simon will die on September 25th. It's so amazing. Prior to September 19th, we expected either Paul Simon to die or a relevant prophetic sign or signs plural. We received the relevant signs, and these signs reveal the date on which Paul Simon will die, which will be September 25th. The same date it is expected that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium. This is relevant because Paul Simon is known to be an avid baseball fan, and the big sign on this day was a baseball sign. Simon once played catch with his audience while performing a concert near where he grew up and played baseball as a kid. When he was recently with his wife in court, he told the judge that after the hearing, they were going to watch their kid play baseball. Okay? Simon is known for being a New York Yankees fan. And now I'm going to get into something, but I first want to interject here that the reason why baseball is so important in God's big picture of signs is that it symbolizes America. James Earl Jones, who recently died, for whom it had been known that his death would be a major prophetic sign since 2019. Since 2019, I knew that James Earl Jones's death would be a massive prophetic sign that indicates the end is now and the destruction is now. And James Earl Jones died on the date 9/9, which, by the way, is symbolic of God's judgment. The number 9 from the Bible, it symbolizes this. James Earl Jones starred in the most iconic baseball movie ever made, in which he delivered a famous monologue in which he said that America could be great again. And he talked about America's history being intertwined with baseball. The movie Field of Dreams is about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. And baseball, in fact, goes back beyond 1919. It goes back into the middle of the 19th century. Baseball is a part of American history. It is intertwined with American history, and it symbolizes America and God's hand on America. It is America's sport, America's pastime, as it is said. So it's very important and very symbolic. This is why Kamala Harris is playing will crash into a baseball stadium right near the gateway arch. Because in the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gates, or the gate. And the gateway arch will be symbolic of this, beginning of destruction, beginning at the gate with her crash in her plane into a baseball stadium, which will lead to her replacement with the Antichrist, Barack Obama. Okay, he will become the president again as a result of this plane crash. So the point is, too, that, well, Barack Obama is also known for being a baseball fan, but specifically the Chicago White Sox, because of the Chicago Black Sox and the history, and on and on, and on and on and on. This is just one more example, this video here, of God using baseball in such an extraordinarily beautiful way. So let's begin the story here. Simon is known for being a New York Yankees fan. And on April 25th, 1999, he played his song, Mrs. Robinson, in center field of Yankee Stadium. It was in honor of famous Yankee Joe DiMaggio, who had recently passed away. The song, Mrs. Robinson, contains the lyric that immortalizes Joe DiMaggio. Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Woo, woo, woo. What's that you say, Mrs. Robinson? Joltin' Joe has left and gone away. So you all know the song, right? If you didn't, maybe the singing that I just did helps you remember this very famous song of Paul Simon's, Mrs. Robinson. The recognition that Mrs. Robinson is a very prophetic sign. So the thing about why God is using Paul Simon, the pioneer of folk rock, is because of the numerous songs that he has sung, his hits, that have prophetic symbolic meaning. This being one of them, Mrs. Robinson, is a hint at Michelle Robinson. Her maiden name is Robinson before she took the name Obama. In fact, I think she still goes by Michelle Robinson Obama. But that's the prophetic significance of Mrs. Robinson here. Okay, and speaking of baseball, we have Brooks Robinson, which is also very prophetic, and there's lots to be said about him. But he is known as Mr. Hoover. Long story, or I won't get into explaining it, but his nickname was Mr. Hoover because he was the vacuum at third base. And God has associated Paul Simon, a baseball fan, with the Hoover Dam, with bridge over troubled water, for example. So, okay, so it goes on and on and on. But so Mrs. Robinson, we have it being sung in a baseball stadium. And Michelle Robinson Obama will become the president. She will replace Kamala Harris as vice president first before Joe Biden is predicted to step down on October 12th, and she becomes the president on October 12th. But first, she will replace she will replace Kamala Harris after her death into a baseball stadium, which is why Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in a baseball stadium. Not only that, though, it's now clear that Paul Simon will die on the same day as Kamala Harris's predicted crash into a baseball stadium. Okay. Simon sang Mrs. Robinson and the lyrics about Joe DiMaggio 48 days after DiMaggio died. These mysterious lyrics about Joe DiMaggio were designed by God to point to Simon's eventual performance shortly after DiMaggio passed away. This is because the Antichrist is the future 48th president, who will be appointed the vice president by Mrs. Michelle Robinson Obama. She will then step down, and the 44th president will become the president again. This is why, on September 19th, 2024, one of the signs was the news of the scandal that broke regarding the GOP candidate for governor of the 4+4+4th state, Mark Robinson, which hints at Michelle Robinson, and the 44th president. That's why he's running for governor of the 4+4+4th state. September 19th, 2024 is 44 days before it is predicted that Michelle Robinson will step down and the 44th president will become the president again on November 2nd, 2024. Okay? That's amazing because November 2nd was known quite a while ago, and this is just more confirmation. These prophetic signs that occurred on September 19th. I didn't even know that September 19th was 44 days before the 44th president will become the president again. Before Simon played for the crowd, at Yankee Stadium, the announcer said that Joe DiMaggio had been immortalized in Simon's song, Mrs. Robinson. Joe DiMaggio is known for having arranged the funeral for Marilyn Monroe after she died, even though they had divorced years earlier and she had remarried and divorced again, for that matter. And by the way, she remarried after Joe DiMaggio, Arthur Miller, who is famous for writing the play Death of a Salesman. And that's because it's a hint at the death of a saleswoman, Kamala Harris, because that's all that she is. She is a vacuum. She is an empty vessel. She is an empty person. She is simply a salesperson for the Democrat Party. That's all. And so anyway, through the death of Kamala Harris on the same day of Paul Simon, this will all be pointed to because, again, Paul Simon is about Joe DiMaggio, who is about Marilyn Monroe, who married Arthur Miller after Joe DiMaggio. Okay. So Joe DiMaggio, though, is known for having arranged the funeral for Marilyn Monroe after she died, even though they had divorced years earlier and she had remarried and divorced again. He famously bent over her coffin and twice said that he loved her. This connection to Simon having immortalized Joe DiMaggio is relevant because of what God pointed to through the acting career of Marilyn Monroe. One of the most iconic pop culture images of the 20th century is Marilyn Monroe's white dress blown upwards by a passing subway train as she's standing on top of a subway grate. This is from the movie The 7-Year Itch. In Bible prophecy, the Antichrist's rule is for a symbolic 7 years. Monroe died exactly 4 + 4 + 4 months after the birth of the 44th president. The name Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. Obama's birth was exactly 320 weeks after the release of the movie The 7-Year Itch. The titular phrase, which refers to waning interest in a monogamous relationship after 7 years of marriage, has been used by psychologists. Since leaving the White House, in 2017, Obama has had a 7-year itch. 7 years later now, 2024. He has been missing his role in the White House, but in the meantime has been part of the current administration behind the scenes. So this 7-year itch movie is clearly a point to Barack Obama because the birth of Barack Obama connects prophetically, astoundingly, to the date of the release of the movie and the date of the death of Marilyn Monroe. Monroe starred in a movie named Monkey Business. It was released on April 5th, 1952, 9 years, 10 months, and 30 days before Monroe died. 9 years, 10 months, and 30 days hints at 913, and G 913 in Strong's Greek Bible Concordance, which is the word, proper noun, Barack. And also again, Monroe died 4 + 4 + 4 months after the birth of Barack Obama. Okay, so Monroe died 4 + 4 + 4 months after the birth of Barack Obama, and she died 9 years and 10 months and 30 days, which hints at Barack Obama, after the release of the movie Monkey Business. By the way, in an interview a few years ago, Barack Obama emptied his pockets and presented a figurine of a monkey. The Hindu god Hanuman, a monkey man. Okay. Barack Obama, as the Antichrist, will preside over an epidemic of monkeypox among those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. That's what's coming. An epidemic of monkeypox among those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, because monkeypox has decimated their immune system. That's the truth. Okay? And so they're susceptible to these things that they wouldn't have otherwise been. The people that haven't taken the mark of the Antichrist will not be getting monkeypox. But the ones that have destroyed their immune system through the controversial pointy thing, that was an untested new technology, etc., are going to have an epidemic of monkeypox. And Barack Obama will preside over this. Monkey Business, the movie Monkey Business, is a comedy about an elixir of youth accidentally made by a chimpanzee in a laboratory. The Antichrist and demons pretending to be aliens will offer an elixir of youth to combat the monkeypox epidemic and other health crises. Monkey Business was released on September 5th, 1952, 9 + 11th prime years, in other words, 71, the 20th prime number, so 9 + 11th prime number of years, 11 months and 9 days, before the WHO declared Mpox to be a health emergency on August 14th, 2024. So you had a bunch of 9s and 11s there. Fallen angels will pretend to be demons, and this is alluded to in Revelation chapter 9, which is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, which describes King Abaddon and the king of destruction that emerges with his fallen angels out of the bottomless pit. Monroe died in Los Angeles, which God uses to hint at fallen angels. The name, Los Angeles. 9 years, 10 months, and 30 days, which hints at Barack, the word, in the Greek concordance. After Monkey Business was released, and Monroe died 4 + 4 + 4 months after the birth of the 44th president, Antichrist. Marilyn Monroe was also in the movie As Young as You Feel, in which the theme of the plot is also about deception and being younger. This movie was released on June 15th, 1951, exactly 4 × 4 × 4 weeks before the release of Monkey Business, the plot of which is also about an elixir of youth. Michelle Robinson Obama will be made the vice president by Joe Biden after Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium on September 25th, 2024. Harris's predicted crash, or death, I should say, on September 25th will be exactly 65 months after Joe Biden announced his candidacy for president on April 25th, 2019. 65, as in the 65 months between Biden's announcement of his candidacy and Harris's predicted death, 65 is the 23rd semi-prime number, and the basketball president wore jersey number 23 in high school. The 44th president will have a second presidency through Joe Biden, and Joe Biden announced his candidacy exactly 20 years, which is 4 times 4 plus 4 years, after Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in Yankee Stadium in tribute to Joe DiMaggio on April 25th, 1999. In other words, Joe DiMaggio connects to Joseph Biden. But also, I just explained how, with a time period, Paul Simon's singing in a baseball stadium connects to the date on which it is predicted that he will die, and Kamala Harris will crash into a baseball stadium, leading to Michelle Robinson and Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson. Okay, so, but also this 20 years connection between Joseph Biden and Joseph DiMaggio is important. This is because in the Bible, the 11th son of the third patriarch is Joseph. The day of the baseball sign and Mark Robinson sign on September 19th, 2024 was 9 times 1,031 days after Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in tribute to Joe DiMaggio. The number 1,031 hints at Joseph, the 11th son of the third patriarch. And at the time, Paul Simon, when he sang Mrs. Robinson in the stadium, had released 9 solo albums. This is the reason for 9 times 1,031 days. On 3/11 in 2021, Joseph Biden made his first public address after having been installed president through the shoplifted referendum, and he said that 3/11 in 2021 was the anniversary of the CVD disease on 3/11 in 2020. In other words, the date 3/11 symbolizes this. Joseph Biden's speech on 3/11, 2021 regarded the CVD thing, the pointy thing, that poisons a person's blood. This is because G131 in Strong's Greek Concordance is the word for blood disease. Joseph DiMaggio started Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospitals, and one of the things they specialize in is blood disorders, which is what a person gets after they have taken the pointy thing, which is why Joseph Biden delivered his big pointy thing speech right at the time when it was first coming out on the date 3/11 because of G131, which means blood disease. There's lots more to be said and confirmations to prove what I've just said about 3/11, 2021. It was exactly, for example, by the way, it was the day that Obama and Michelle Robinson took the thing. That was the same day. The Antichrist took the thing on the day that Biden touted the thing on 3/11 because of G131, because it poisons a person's blood. But it was 90 days after the SN9 rocket fell off of its platform on December 11th, 2020, on the same day that God's trumpet, trumpeted the approval of the pointy thing. Well, anyway, so there's lots to say about 3/11, 2021. Joseph DiMaggio started Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospitals, and one of the things they specialize in is blood disorders. The location of Harris's predicted plane crash in St. Louis will point to the CVD pointy things. Okay, and the reason why that is because St. Louis is near where the two eclipses that traversed over America in 2017 and 24 crossed each other and engendered an X, which is symbolic of chromosomes which are altered by the CVD pointy thing. X's are about their midpoints, two lines that cross each other at the middle, and the middle date of the two eclipses that engendered an X was December 14th, 2020, the day that the first American took the thing outside of a trial. And by the way, the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. In its current form, it does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship or a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is in fact judgment for this particular doctrine, which Jesus said he hates in Revelation chapter 2 and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this Nicolaitan doctrine, which is the doctrine of our day in the American evangelical church, once saved, always saved, Calvinism, free grace, dispensationalism, and sovereign grace, Reformed theology. Jesus hates this theology. Anyway, I know far better than you the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, and it is to prove the things that I have just said. And the commonly held objections that people have based on their understanding of Bible prophecy are answered in the must-watch snake bite video on this channel. But make no mistake, when this prediction comes to pass, it will prove that the commonly held objections for why this thing can't be the mark of the Antichrist are incorrect. Case closed. End of debate. That's the purpose of the prediction. And I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Case closed. End of debate. It's over. It is the mark of the Antichrist. Now, nowhere in the Bible does it say that one can't repent after having taken the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, so this is why the date of her predicted death will connect to the announcement of Joseph Biden's candidacy, and why this in turn connects to Joseph DiMaggio and his sick children's hospitals, which also points to monkeypox through Marilyn Monroe. Now, I also need to add one thing here, is that the sick, twisted society that we live in broke the social contract when the narcissistic baby boomer generation, the elders, demanded the sacrifice of the children in order to protect them. Because everyone knew, of course, that the CVD did not affect children, unless, of course, they were completely brainwashed and were true COVIDian cultists. Everyone knew that. There was no reason for kids to take the thing, only to stop the spread in order to protect the elder generation. But this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen. You're not allowed to do that. This hasn't happened in history. The older generation does not sacrifice the younger generation. Only in our wicked, selfish, corrupt age could this have happened, where the godless, narcissistic baby boomer generation that completely rejected God in the 1960s and 70s, could this have happened? And the price will be paid soon. Judgment is coming. But this is why God is pointing to Joe DiMaggio, who started Joe DiMaggio's Sick Children's Hospitals, which specialize in blood disorders. God is very angry about this. Additionally, Marilyn Monroe died from an overdose of barbiturates that was administered with a thing, a pointy thing. Her acting roles point to monkeypox and a coming promise of immortality through an elixir of youth that will be administered with a thing. At the time of her death, she was having a sexual affair with the 35th president. The movie The Graduate is about a character named Mrs. Robinson who is having a sexual affair. That's the song Mrs. Robinson was composed for the movie. It's an interesting story in itself. Paul Simon didn't want to do such a thing, create a pop song for a mainstream Hollywood movie, but he ended up doing it, and it became a big hit. And anyway, so that's The Graduate, but The Graduate is about a sexual affair, all right? And this is why Paul Simon performed Mrs. Robinson after the death of DiMaggio, who was known for his role after the death of Monroe, who died from a thing, a pointy thing, and acted in movies about regaining youth. DiMaggio was a lover of Monroe, who at the time of her death was having an affair with the 35th president. The 35th president died in his vehicle on the on-ramp to the I-35 while serving in the White House. This is why Paul Simon performed Mrs. Robinson exactly 305 months, which into 35, before Simon's predicted death and the predicted death of Harris in her vehicle while she is serving in the White House, just like the 35th president. So it's all full circle. Furthermore, the 35th president's presidency is referred to as Camelot, which hints at Kamala. On September 19th, 2024, we received the prophetic sign involving Mark Robinson and a baseball sign that occurred in the city with the area code 305. Again, Paul Simon performed in the baseball stadium 305 months before the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash and his predicted death, but her crash will be into a baseball stadium. And on September 19th, the date that God was pointed to regarding Paul Simon, we had the sign involving Mark Robinson and the prophetic sign in the baseball stadium in the area code 305, which is why the 305 months. It's amazing. In the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. Paul Simon's 9th album was released on November 18th, 1997, 11 times 23 days before Simon sang Mrs. Robinson at Yankee Stadium. 1123 is the 188th prime number, and H188 is the word woe exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. Simon's 9th album reached number 42 on the Billboard pop chart. In Bible prophecy, the number 42 symbolizes slaughter and the period of the Antichrist. The number 19 is symbolic of God's perfect judgment. The number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 10 symbolizes God's perfect order from the Bible. Hence, 9 plus 10, 19, equals God's perfect judgment. Simon's 9th album was released exactly 19 years after the poisoning of people's blood. So before I get into that, Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert was on the date 9/19, and this date 9/19 in 2024, as I'm explaining, is a Paul Simon sign. All right? So that's also why the 9th studio album was released exactly 19 years after the poisoning of people's blood through things, pointy things, in the Jonestown suicide murder massacre. The Jonestown suicide murder massacre was 666 days after Jimmy Carter's inauguration, which was the day after Paul Simon performed his song American Tune at Carter's pre-inaugural ball. Okay, so let me just pause here. If you didn't know, the Jonestown suicide murder massacre involved pointy things. They did also drink the Kool-Aid to speed up the process, but they poisoned their blood through pointy things in this mass suicide murder. More is explained on this very, very important subject in the must-watch Jonestown video on this channel, okay? Now, as I was saying, Paul's 9th studio album was released a prophetic number of days, an extremely prophetic number of days, because it hints at this number that God uses frequently, this number 188, because of whoa exclamation mark, before he sang Mrs. Robinson. So now we have a connection to confirm the relevance of his 9th studio album, okay? Because it was released this prophetic number of days before he sang Mrs. Robinson in Yankee Stadium, which we've already established as being prophetic. Now, 19 years before the 9th studio album, and I explained why 9 and 19 together are relevant, especially in terms of Paul Simon, was this massacre involving pointy things, the Jonestown suicide murder massacre, okay, which is very important, happened during Carter's presidency, and it was 666 days after the beginning of Carter's presidency, and that's related to Paul Simon because he sang American Tune at the beginning of Carter's presidency. That was a symbolic beginning of Carter's presidency with Paul Simon, Paul Simon being very prophetic, singing American Tune, a melancholy tune about America, and Carter's ending of his presidency is also symbolic because it ended with 444 days, coinciding with the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which hinted at the 44th president, Antichrist, whose number in Bible prophecy is 666. And that's why the 666 days to the Jonestown, because the Jonestown massacre with the cult, which was a leftist communist cult, is a complete parallel with Barack Obama and the political cult, which is a religious cult, just like Jonestown was a political cult, but it was religious because communism is a religion. Anyway, Jonestown is completely a parallel because Jim Jones is symbolic of the Antichrist, the cult leader, right? And that's what's happening today. The spirit of Antichrist is bringing about for this cult that is already present for its leader to take over, the 44th president. Again, that's why the Jonestown massacre was 666 days after the beginning of the Carter presidency, but the end of the Carter presidency points to Barack Obama, the 44th president, who is a Jim Jones, who will mandate, like he did for the people at Jonestown, people take the thing which causes suicide, and those that go along will be forced to go along, like he did at the Jonestown, and that will be a murder. Okay. And that, by the way, is past tense. That's already happened. Okay? People have already been murdered, just like in Jonestown. Okay? One of the hostages went on a hunger strike. And because of the coming food shortages, the Antichrist will compel people to make a decision to take the thing through restricting food to those who refuse to take it. Only the good citizens will have the the food that is in short supply. Simon's 9th studio album was for his Broadway musical that cost $11 million. Okay, 9/11. By the way, Paul Simon, prophetic sign when he sang on Saturday Night Live in Manhattan a few days after 9/11. And he also sang at the memorial on the 10th anniversary. So Paul Simon, furthermore, is synonymous with New York City. And his 9th studio album was for his Broadway musical that cost $11 million. And the musical is considered to be one of the biggest flops in Broadway history. God uses records for his signs. This is a record. It was a record flop. The 9th album and $11 million hinted at the warning of judgment on 9/11, and also Revelation 9/11 and the coming mass demonic possession of those who have taken the pointy thing. By the way, Paul Simon's prophetic reunion concert in Central Park was 9 months and 11 days after John Lennon was shot and killed next to Central Park. Barack Obama is a murderer, and before becoming the president again, Mrs. Michelle Robinson, will make him the 51st vice president. The musical, Paul Simon's musical, is about a character who is a murderer and immigrant from Puerto Rico, the 51st state. On Simon's 9th album is a song titled Born in Puerto Rico. In 2010, Simon's musical was performed in Central Park. The baseball sign and Mark Robinson sign on September 19, 2024 were exactly 43 years after Simon and Garfunkel's historic reunion concert in Central Park, in which they performed Mrs. Robinson, and the last song played was Late in the Evening, a Latin American style song. 43 years is relevant because it hints at 4 plus 3 and 7, and Paul Simon is symbolism for the sound of silence that was heard in heaven in Revelation chapter 8 before the 7 trumpet judgments and destruction begins. That's why Paul Simon's death will coincide with the beginning of destruction. It'll be a brief moment of silence. That's why I think he'll die maybe even a half hour before Kamala Harris dies. But because the sound of silence was heard for a half hour, as it says in the Bible. And that's also why his most recent and last album is named 7 Songs. So that's why for 40 years plus 30 plus 40 years plus 3 years, which would hint at 7. The baseball sign we received on September 19th, 2024. Okay, so I've been talking about how Paul Simon is related to baseball, and I've been talking about September 19th. Now I'm going to explain the baseball sign that occurred on September 19th. So the baseball sign we received on September 19th was star baseball player Shohei Ohtani's 51st home run and 51st stolen base for the season. The first time ever in baseball history that 51-51 was achieved. The name Ohtani and the first ever achievement hints at Obama, the first black affirmative action president. The first time that 51-51 had been reached that included 51 stolen bases hinted at the 51st vice president, future 51st vice president, Barack Obama, and the first time the presidency has been shoplifted. September 19th, 2024 is also 5 plus 1 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium on the day that Paul Simon is predicted to die. On September 19th, not only did Ohtani reach this unprecedented level, but he had what is being called the best ever offensive baseball game. So it just so happens that with this big night, this big level that the whole baseball world was watching and waiting for, he actually on the same night had a spectacular best ever in baseball history offensive night. It's the way God would do it. He would do that to emphasize the significance of what I'm talking about. So for example, he had 6 hits in 6 at-bats. This hints at Simon's death and Harris's plane crash 6 days later into a baseball stadium. He also became the first person in history to hit 3 home runs and steal 2 bases in the same game. And this too hints at 3 times 2 days before Simon's predicted death and Harris's predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium. As well, the name Obama, which hints at Ohtani, is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. Also, home run balls that are hit high into the air and fall back to earth into the stadium point to Harris's plane crash from high in the air and into a baseball stadium. Furthermore, her plane will have departed Los Angeles, and her plane crash will be symbolic of fallen angels. Before Ohtani reached 51-51 on September 19th, 2024, he reached 50-50 on the same night. This was the big level that everyone was watching for. The first person to ever hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in the same season. But he did both of these on the same night. Ohtani's pursuit, and he ended at 51-51. He didn't end at 51-50 or 51-52. God designed it perfectly. He was 3 home runs shy of 51 and 2 stolen bases shy of 51. That's what he did on that night. And that too hit at Obama, as I just explained, because of 32 and 3 times 2 days. Okay. Ohtani's pursuit of 50-50 was being watched by the baseball world, and it was celebrated once it was reached on September 19th. This hinted at the exact 5 years and 5 months between the date Joe Biden announced his candidacy and the predicted date that Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium. Shohei Ohtani is a baseball player from Japan. All right, so Shohei Ohtani is this big phenomenon. This is the most interesting thing in baseball today. And he's this unprecedented athlete that's just done so many unprecedented things. God has designed this for these prophetic signs, including what I'm describing that happened on September 19th. But there have been a number of other prophetic Shohei Ohtani signs. Well, anyway, what's also unusual about this player is that he's from Japan. He doesn't speak English. He's a baseball player from Japan, okay? And God is using Japan in his signs for important reasons. One being, it's pointing to nuclear weapons in his signs. Another reason, Japan animation, which is obsessed with possession of people, which is why God uses Japan in his signs to hint at the coming mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, facilitated through the components that have been put into people from the thing, the mark of the Antichrist. So Japan, in other words, is important. But so this big story of the year is this Japanese baseball player, all right? Now, on April 10th, 2024, Paul Simon performed at the White House for a state dinner for the Prime Minister of Japan. To confirm his signs and connections, God pairs the numbers 9, 23, and 44 together as the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school became the 44th president in 2009. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I've been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 6 years. Okay, so again, Shohei Ohtani is from Japan. On April 10th, 2024, Paul Simon performed at the White House for a state dinner for the Prime Minister of Japan. Okay? You know what? I'm going to just add it right here. The song he sang was Graceland. Well, no, never mind. Okay, so that was April 10th, singing for the Prime Minister of Japan at the White House. Okay? And 9:23 and 44 are paired together. The day after Paul Simon performed at the White House, state dinner, for the Prime Minister of Japan on April 10th, the Los Angeles Police Department charged Ohtani's former Japanese interpreter on April 11th with stealing 4 times $4 million from Ohtani. This was exactly 23 weeks, or 44.00% of a calendar year, before Ohtani's big night on September 19th, when he stole 2 bases and hit 3 home runs, which hints at 23, in the 9+9+9th state to join the Union, 2 times 3 days, which hits at 23, before Harris's predicted crash into a baseball stadium. On the same day, it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. So Paul Simon connects through all of this. He connects through his singing at the White House, through the baseball sign with Ohtani on September 19th, to the date he's predicted to die. Because again, it's amazing. I'll just say it again. 4 times $4 million was 23 weeks, which is 44.00% of the year, to the 2 bases stolen and 3 home runs in the 9+9+9th state, 2 times 3 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a baseball stadium. On the day it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. That's amazing. But also, I didn't include this. The date 410 and 411 are connected to each other in more ways than just the Japanese Prime Minister followed by the interpreter that's Japanese for the baseball player that's from Japan. These signs actually coincide with the death of O.J. Simpson in Los Angeles. The interpreter was charged in Los Angeles, and O.J. Simpson is known for his car chase through the highways of Los Angeles, and Kamala Harris's plane will depart from Los Angeles. Well, anyway, O.J. Simpson died in Los Angeles on the 10th, and the news of his death was reported on the 11th. That's another way in which the 2 dates coincide. Also, O.J. Simpson was born in San Francisco. Kamala Harris is from San Francisco. And on, actually. O.J. Simpson was on his way in the car chase to his home. He was homeward bound to his home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, and he was chased up the I-5 highway. Kamala Harris has a $5 million home in Brentwood, California, okay? Her plane flight will be homeward bound, but I believe it'll be bound for Washington, her home in Washington, after she's visiting her mansion in Los Angeles, okay? And that's just some more of scratching the surface of the science here. Now, if I've piqued your interest, if this all sounds interesting to you, believe me, I've only just started. You need to watch the O.J. Simpson video. There's 2. The longer one is the one you need to watch. Okay? Make sure you watch the O.J. Simpson video on this channel. It is so extremely important and extremely interesting. It is an absolute necessity that you watch it. Okay? But these parallels are so amazing. And there's more to the story, though. It's very important. because O.J. Simpson died 7 + 7 + 7 days after the plane that was on its way to Japan dropped its wheel onto the Hertz parking lot in the San Francisco airport. And 7 + 7 + 7 is relevant because the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. And the I-5 chase of O.J. Simpson was known for representing Hertz. More than he was known for being a football player, he was known for his commercials for the Hertz rental car company, which is where the wheel landed in San Francisco, the home of O.J. Simpson. And O.J. Simpson also played football for the San Francisco 49ers. Kamala Harris is the 49th vice president, who is from San Francisco. The reason why the wheel landed on the Hertz parking lot is because, and the I-5 highway and Kamala Harris's $5 million mansion, is because of 5G Hertz frequencies that will be used to trigger the components that are in people from the thing, which will then facilitate delta brainwaves and trigger mass demonic possession of these people. Which is why the first lyric in the song Graceland, which is the song Paul Simon sang on the day that O.J. Simpson died, begins with him traveling through the Mississippi Delta, because it hints at delta brainwaves, frequencies, that will facilitate demonic possession. But that will all be triggered by the 5G frequencies. Okay? And so. Now, O.J. Simpson went to jail in Las Vegas, and he was released. And part of the chase was not only down the I-5, but also the US 91 highway. And he was released from jail in Las Vegas on the same day as the deadliest mass shooting in US history, which was in Las Vegas at the Route 91 Music Festival. The music festival is named Route 91, and O.J. Simpson was released in Las Vegas on the same day, and he was chased down the U.S. Route 91. And that's because of what I'm saying, of the slaughter that's coming. Because things that come out of guns and go into people, mass shootings, are symbolic of the things that come out of things and go into people. And the shooter shot from the 32nd floor. The name Obama is equal to 32 of the Mandalay Hotel, and the name Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. Okay. In the White House, at the state dinner, and believe me, you still need to watch the O.J. Simpson video. In the White House, at the state dinner for the Prime Minister of Japan, Simon sang his song Graceland. Simon's album Graceland was released on August 25th, 1986, exactly 457 months before the predicted death of Paul Simon and Harris's predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium. 457 is the 88th prime number. The day after Simon sang Graceland at the White House to the Prime Minister of Japan was the day that the Japanese interpreter for the Japanese player Otani was charged for stealing $8 + $8 million from him. The Graceland album was released exactly 8 times 8th prime number, which is 19, of months before Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson at Yankee Stadium. Through his song, Sound of Silence, Paul Simon is symbolic of the sound of silence that John heard for about a half an hour in heaven, which is mentioned in Revelation chapter 8. This is why the release of Simon's Graceland album connects with the 88th prime number to his predicted death. it points to Revelation chapter 8 and the sound of silence. The sound of silence in heaven that John heard was then followed by the 7 trumpets of judgment and destruction, which is why Paul Simon's last album is 7 Psalms. Paul Simon's death, and by the way, the last song at the prophetic reunion concert, late in the evening, is a song involving trumpets. And Paul Simon is symbolism for the sound of silence that's followed by the 7 trumpet judgments. That's why it's late in the evening. It's a metaphor from God that's saying time is up. It's late for America to repent and turn back to God. That's why the last song is late in the evening. Furthermore, it's believed that either Paul Simon or Kamala Harris will die at 3 a.m. on the Wednesday because of the album Wednesday morning 3 a.m., which was released the day before Kamala Harris was born. As I'm about to explain. So I'm just about to repeat myself here, actually. So Paul Simon's death will be a brief period of calm before the judgment and destruction of America will commence. The song Sound of Silence and Simon and Garfunkel's first album, Wednesday morning 3 a.m., were released the day before Kamala Harris was born, which is why it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die on a Wednesday. Either Paul Simon or Kamala Harris will die at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning, September 25th, 2024. Simon's Graceland album was released on April 25th, 1986. 660 weeks and 6 days, which is at 666, the number of the Antichrist, before Simon performed Mrs. Robinson at Yankee Stadium. This is also 12 years and 8 months, and this hints at G128, which is the word in the Greek concordance for the Ethiopian. The Ethiopian in the book of Acts in the Bible was a court official of the Queen of Egypt, who was in charge of all of her treasure and was on a journey back to Egypt. The song Graceland, Paul Simon's song Graceland, is about a journey that Simon made to the King of Rock's Graceland mansion, symbolism for a king's palace, in Memphis, as in Memphis, Egypt, in an area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt. God uses the number 128 in his signs to point to the Ethiopian in the Bible as symbolism for the future Antichrist king who will be in the White House, as the mansion, as in the King of Rock's mansion, where Paul Simon sang Graceland. This future Antichrist king is being symbolized by the Ethiopian in the Bible, this future Antichrist king, who was born in East Africa, near Ethiopia, Kenya, Barack Obama. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.